Good morning team, welcome back to The Commute. If you're new here, my name is Michael, I'm a school teacher, and this is my series where I spend 10-20 minutes having a chat with you on my way to work. It's like a podcast but in the car. If you enjoy, please subscribe, leave a like, it helps out immensely. I finished Shōgun, and boy what a book it was. I'm going to try and give you a very quick review, spontaneously, on my way to work, so we'll see how it turns out. I do warn you, as I'm rambling, I may slip a spoiler out here and there, so if you haven't read it and you hate spoilers, you have been warned. Right off the bat, if you want a quick should I read it, the short answer is yes. If you like historical fiction, fantastic characters, a beautiful world, fantastic writing, Clavell's writing style's brilliant, read it. The book will absolutely sweep you away to Japan in the 1600s. It is magnificent. I absolutely fell in love with the characters. By the end of the book, like, legitimately I was mourning the loss of one character, which I will not spoil, but I was legitimately heartbroken. And once I read that last line, I was like, you know what? I really miss Toranaga. I really miss Blackthorn, and I'll sure as hell miss Mariko. The characters were so deeply developed and real and raw and human. And as I said, I just fell in love with them, and I loved who they were and what they stood for, and the character arc of Blackthorn was beautiful. He came, arguably, arriving as a savage, and by the end of the book was this highly esteemed gentleman who had been through so much turmoil and trouble, but he found himself, and it was wonderful. The book itself, as I said, I really loved the writing style. Took me a wee while to get into it, but once you're in it, you're in it. There's a lot of dialogue, it's very dialogue heavy. And in all honesty, if you're expecting like a big book about war, it's not necessarily gonna be your book. It's more or less about plotting up to war and all of the strategic things that characters do to gain advantage over each other. As I said, it's about betrayal, it's about strategy, and at the heart of it, even though it's not the main plot, is the most beautiful love story. A secret love story that no one can know about. But gosh, it was magical, and by the end of the book, I thought the ending was so fitting with Tetsuko, which is Toranaga's peregrine falcon. I won't say what happens, but I thought it was a really beautiful book, and what Shōgun taught me was not so much just about history, but about culture, about historical Japanese practices, and the beauty of, is it Bushido, the way of the samurai? And their way of living. I thought it was very peaceful, and I've actually taken a lot away from the book. Even though it's a work of fiction, it was so heavily researched. As I said, it took Clavell about 3 years to write, I believe. And he himself was a prisoner of war in Japan, and he became so fascinated by that culture. And he wrote King Rat first, and then Taipan, and then he wrote Shōgun. But long story short, read that book, it's fantastic. I haven't read much in my time, as I said, I'm only 21, but I think it will go down as one of those books that I'll never be able to sell. It'll always sit on my shelf, and I'll probably go back to read every now and then. It's a monster of a book. It took me a while. It's the paperback copy that I read. It's a printing that came out when the 1980 TV miniseries came out. 1,243 pages. So it's a monster of a book. I think it's actually longer than Lord of the Rings. And it took me ages, but never once did I want to put it down. Never once. And now, what I've managed to do, and I didn't actually realize this, the next book I've picked up and I've just started reading is called Musashi by E.G. Yoshikawa. And it is written in the same time period. What I didn't realize was Musashi picks up at the very, very end of Shōgun. Exactly where Shōgun ends, Musashi picks up. And Musashi tells the story of one of Ishido's samurai. I believe it was Ishido's samurai. No, it wasn't even. He was just... The main character, Musashi, was just from a village, and he wanted to fight in a war to prove himself to his father, because his father said he'd never become of anything. And long story short, it begins on the battlefield at... Is it Sekigahara? I can't remember the name of the battle, but it's the battle that Toranaga fights at the very end, which is the culmination of the book. As I said, spoilers. I told you there would be spoilers. And gosh, we're waiting here for a while. It picks up from the perspective of one of the soldiers that lost the battle and becomes Ronin because his master is, I suppose, killed or relinquished. So I actually get to, even though it's completely different characters and it's a very different writing style and, you know, it's the same world, I get to carry on, in a way, that story. But gosh, I'll miss Toranaga. I'll really miss Mariko. I loved Mariko. She was a beautiful, beautiful character. And I'll sure as hell miss Blackthorn. But hey, that was my little 5-minute spiel about Shōgun. It's a magical book. It taught me a lot about, as I said, culture and a beautiful way of living. And I think it was so much more than just a work of fiction. Long story short, read it. And if you don't like reading, at the very least watch the show. I don't think the show does the book justice. And it doesn't portray the characters in the depth that Clavell does. But it's still fantastic. And if you like old television, it's a bit dated, but why not give the mini-series that came out in 1980 ago with Richard Chamberlain? As I said, it's very dated and also end of its time, but it's still a good watch. But hey, have a good morning, afternoon or evening. Love to you and your family. It was lovely to see you. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of The Commute. Ka kite.